Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Under the Hoodie. My name is Scott Hoyt, the host of Under the Hoodie, which is presented and produced by Fantasy Sports Strategies. We launched Under the Hoodie to do exactly what the name suggests. Go beyond the surface and have real, unfiltered conversations with people shaping the fantasy sports and gaming industry in many meaningful ways. Today's episode is especially exciting because we're diving into a topic that has completely captured the sports world and will dominate conversations for days to come. We all know what we're talking about. That would be called the Super Bowl. One could argue, though, that what has been dominating the airwaves over the last week and a half is the coaching carousel that we've seen. And I'm sure that we will talk about that as well. What truly makes, for me, this episode very special is not what we're talking about, but who we're having this conversation with. I am joined today by one of the best analytical minds in fantasy sports and gaming today. Someone I personally have admired and followed for years. And while he needs no introduction, anyone who's followed fantasy sports knows who Howard Bender is. And before I bring Howard on, it's important that I kind of share with who Howard is and some of the accolades, because it's impressive. Not only is he the host of an award-winning SiriusXM nationally syndicated fantasy alarm show, he's also a renowned sports betting analyst. He's a fantasy sports expert, I can attest to that personally. And he's an award-winning writer and podcast host. And here's the kicker. If you look at his background, like I have, and know him as I have, he also got his Master's of Arts graduate degree in, and wait for this, in theater way back in the day. So I'm sure we will talk about that as well. I can't wait to dive into our conversation and get his take on the recently completed fantasy season. We'll talk about that, what he thought about this coaching carousel, which I just mentioned briefly. And of course, we'll talk about the playoffs that we have just seen over the last 3 weeks, some very exciting playoffs. But most importantly, we will touch on, spend a vast majority of our time, if we can, on the Super Bowl. So with that, without further ado, welcome to Under the Hoodie, Howard Bender.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Scott. Very much appreciate you inviting me here. Love getting a chance to just chop it up with you about fantasy sports, Super Bowl, you name it. We can touch on the coaching carousel too, if you like.
Well, let's just go there because, as I said in the beginning, this time is typically dedicated talking about the Super Bowl and the matchups. And it goes on every day for many, many days, as you know. But what seems to be at the center of a lot of people's conversations in these talk shows and in the media and social media is this coaching carousel. And we have had 10 this year, which seems for me a little bit high, but I might be exaggerating that. We get it every year, which means then you have at least 10 new OCs, 10 new DCs, and other organizations who are firing OCs and DCs. That impact has a lot of ramifications, especially in the fantasy world, correct?
Oh, it is a huge impact. And we have seen, we haven't seen 10 head coaches getting chopped, at this point in quite some time. We really haven't. And it's not just 10 OCs or 10 DCs also. I think we were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of like 16 or 17 offensive coordinators were going to change. Probably about a dozen defensive coordinators, maybe like 14 right now. And that is like when it's my beginning in fantasy football, like when I do my research, it always begins with the coaches. And I write articles inside the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide talking about the coaching movement and what their scheme is, because that's one of the ways. That's how I identify sleepers, potential breakouts, because do they fit in the scheme? Because you could take the most talented player in the world and have a horrible offensive scheme for him, and he's not going to do what you want him to do. On the other hand, you could take the most mediocre running back and put him in a system that has, great zone blocking and run first mentality. And all of a sudden that player, shoots up draft boards completely. So for me, it starts with the coaching movement. Then I'll worry about the NFL draft. But coaches first, always.
Yeah, and I know we didn't really plan on talking about this, but because it's so topical, I thought it was pretty relevant for the audience to hear this because
Sure.
it's a lot of changes. And the one that caught my attention, Joe Brady last night or yesterday.
Ooh.
I'm not sure, other than maybe the influence of Josh Allen, but I heard you last night talk about it, and I think you and I share the same common opinion. I'm not sure why Joe Brady.
I'm not sure why Joe Brady either. And, and a lot of people talk about that Josh Allen had, a say in all of this. I almost want to say that I know Josh Allen is just, he's got he's got a long-term deal and he's the starting quarterback. And it's always easier to just kind of promote from within and maintain the same offensive scheme because the guys who are there, they don't have to learn a new playbook. That's always the biggest problem, right? You look at like Trevor Lawrence's career, and his career was just an absolute nightmare to start because he kept having to learn a new playbook. So I kind of feel like that's the reason that Josh Allen was like, yeah, okay, I'm good with Joe Brady. Let's keep this because we want to try and run it back. We want to try to win a Super Bowl now. And if we have to start from scratch, it's going to be problematic. But the real problem is that this scheme just doesn't suit Josh Allen. He likes to chuck the ball downfield. And they just, Joe Brady likes his, shorter, low A dot crossing routes. And that is just, there's no alpha receiver on that team. Is Joe Brady going to even want to get an alpha receiver on that team? So very big problems going on in Buffalo. And as a Jets fan, I'm here for it.
So I need to ask you, the other one that caught my attention, by the way, is McDaniel with the Chargers. Because boy, oh boy, if Herbert's line gets healthy, what's that's going to do to Herbert and Hampton and the whole gang there? That's a very talented offensive scheme they have. Add McDaniel to the mix, and you might have something that people are going to bet on come first of the year on making it to the Super Bowl.
Oh, I'm ready to invest immediately right now. Immediately. I mean, you look at, McDaniel, he brought the Kyle Shanahan style offense with his nuances from San Francisco to Miami. We saw exactly what that did, when they had Tyreek Hill, when they had, with Devon Achane, and even when you look at what Jonnu Smith's target share was a couple of seasons ago as the tight end. So, that's one of the things that always makes it easier. If you track the coaching movement, you can almost track which players are going to pop the most because when you look at it, you're like, okay, Jonnu Smith played the George Kittle role. Devon Achane played the Christian McCaffrey role. Tyreek Hill played the, Brandon Ayuk role or whoever was the considered the number one receiver there. So now, you move that into Los Angeles. Omarion Hampton in the Devon Achane, Christian McCaffrey role, yes. Oronde Gadsden in the George Kittle type role. I mean, he's not as good of a blocker as George Kittle is, but that dude will run routes. So I'm very bullish on the on this team coming into this season. Absolutely.
Yeah, and their line's going to get healthier. I mean, Alt will be back, and I'm convinced that Harbaugh's got the answer to that. Hey, Howard, I want to step back a little bit, and we're going to get back to football, but I know that there's some general questions I'd love to ask you, and I know my listeners would love to know is, why Juneau, Alaska?
Why not Juneau, Alaska? If you've never been here, I mean, listen, I'll say it right now. The vibe, the people, just everything about where we are right now, where my wife and I moved to has just been spectacular. Born and raised in New York. Yeah. Right. Lived in Manhattan for, 20 odd years, dealt with that, moved from New York to San Francisco, moved to the outer sunset, over by like Ocean Beach. So we were on the coast in the Bay Area there. And, it was one of those things where we left New York because it was too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter.
Yeah.
We moved to Northern California where it was supposed to be like, if you move out to like the, Ocean Beach, it was supposed to be like low 50s, hazy, overcast, right? Like I'm built for comfort, not for speed. I don't do the hot weather thing at all. And the next thing I know, as we've been, as we were on the coast in Northern California, it just started getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And I was like, yeah, okay, get me out of here. And during COVID, my wife and I, we were, obviously it was the shelter in place situation, watching any and every movie that we possibly could to just kind of keep ourselves occupied when not doing, when not working. And, here's the confession, right? So I'm a romantic comedy guy. I know.
Yeah, there's that theater.
Nobody likes to
degree coming out, isn't it? There it is.
Right? I mean, nobody likes. Listen, I like to go to the movies to be entertained. I don't need to go to have some thought provoking. I go to the movies to like forget about my life. And you know what? I love love. Yeah. So I am a sucker for romantic comedies, and I always will be. We watched The Proposal with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock. And he is from Sitka, Alaska, which is near here. Now, Sitka is probably about a quarter of the size of Juneau. So we didn't really want to be in that spot there and go too small. So we came up and we visited Juneau in March of 2025. We did it out of season. So the cruise ships weren't up here. It wasn't rampant with tourists. We could actually talk to a lot of the local people. Met with a couple of people, one of whom was a realtor who knew his partner knew me from fantasy football. His partner is a diehard Seahawks fan, huge fantasy football guy. Oh. I got at it. He gave me a list of like property managers because we were talking about renting instead of buying to move up here first. And we left his office, and about 10 minutes later, I got a text from him saying, "I think I've got a place for you." And he connected me with a guy who used to be in the Coast Guard, who now works for the city of Juneau. And he and his wife were moving into another house, like right around the corner. And they were thinking about selling, and then they were thinking about renting. And there you go. It all just kind of snowballed into like one very quick happening thing. And I got to tell you, this is without a doubt the best decision I ever made.
So have you become kind of the norm of Juneau, Alaska? When you walk into places, they know who you are?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I work from home so much here, right? I work from home and I'm constantly doing stuff. So I don't really get to go out as much. When I go out, I'll to do like dog walks and stuff like that. But, every once in a while, my wife tries to, pop in and tell people what I do because, she likes playing fantasy football also, and she would love a local league here. So she throws that out there every once in a while. But no, I'm not a world famous or Juneau famous person yet.
Well, yet. I think the key word is yet. I suspect that. So you talked about, you're a New Yorker at heart. I know you're a huge Yankees fan, huge Jets fan. Peel back that onion. What sport maybe your most favorite affinity to? Are you a basketball guy, baseball guy, football guy? I think I know the answer. Hockey guy. I think I know the answer, but share with the audience who, what sport do you really love the most?
I started off as a baseball guy. Like that was my beginning in this industry. I covered the White Sox as a beat writer.
I'm sorry about the Royals. As a Cubs fan, I'm sorry.
I covered the Royals as well as a beat writer. The covering the Royals was amazing because that was at the time when like Eric Hosmer and Mike Moustakas, they were just up and coming through the system. So it was a lot of fun. Baseball will always be my first love. I grew up 6 subway stops away from Yankee Stadium in the late 70s, right? Like Thurman Munson was my number one guy. I mean, I was so in love with being, I wasn't a good baseball player, but I loved the game so much. So when the internet really just boosted fantasy so much, I mean, it was all about fantasy baseball leagues, fantasy baseball blogs. I was writing for Fangraphs for a little while when I first started in the industry. So that'll always be my love. But the problem is that obviously football drives the bus, it sure does, right? I mean, and then, the coverage for it is 365. So I get a little breather after the Super Bowl to do like the Fantasy Alarm MLB draft guide. And I've started building half-season leagues for baseball, because I know that once the All-Star break hits, I have to go neck deep into football completely. So original love is definitely baseball, but where it's at right now is I'm probably a better fantasy football guy than I am a fantasy
Yes, I'm
baseball.
going to remind you of a quick story. It was a year ago in Vegas. You were there and you covered the baseball draft.
Your draft.
I was there with, and you know who my partner was Anthony Aniano, who was a huge Mets fan. And I really didn't want to do a baseball draft because I'm just so consumed with football stuff. I've done it in the past, as you know, it takes a lot of work. And so the FSGA hooked me up with Anthony, and he and I got on a couple phone calls, and I used your draft guide. But he would kept intercepting my draft guide by drafting Mets players. I know you remember that story because I think
we talked about it during the broadcast. I said to you, I was like, how hard is it being working with a partner who's as much of a Mets homer as Aniano is?
I mean, at some point, I just had to say, it's all yours, Anthony. Take it over. We now have a Mets team. But we finished second. We finished in second place. Thanks to Scooble, for one. He was probably the key ingredient on that one. So anyway, I like you. In terms of sports, my baseball is my first affinity, but I've turned into a big football nerd because of just the coverage and all that. So let's switch gears a little bit. Speaking of football, I know that the fantasy sports season is pretty much over. It ended several weeks ago. I mean, but some people play in the playoffs. I didn't get all that. Let's talk a little bit about this year, and there's some interesting themes here, but I don't want to, it's been talked about ad nauseum. Who are some of the biggest disappointments and who are some of the biggest surprises from your perspective?
All right. Well, let's see. All right. First and foremost, do you want to go good? Do we want to start positive or we want to start negative? Because I'm good either way.
I tend to like to finish on a high note.
Then we'll start with the negatives, and it can all of my drafts. It'll all center around Kenneth Walker and Chuba Hubbard. Like, I know we can't predict injuries, right? But I knew the type of coach that Clint Kubiak was, and then he brought in Rick Dennison to be his offensive line coach, and talk to any old timer in the industry, and we can talk about what Rick Dennison and Gary Kubiak did for like the 90s Broncos and all of those players, right? Remember when guys like Reuben Drones and Orlandis Gary were like 1,000-yard rushers out of Denver for no reason? There is a reason. So I knew that Kubiak and Dennison were going to be great in Seattle, and Kenneth Walker was, a great running back to be able to use. Same thing with Chuba Hubbard. Dave Canales, run first guy, has been turned Rashad White, who's an absolute tomato can of a runner, right? Terribly inefficient, but he made him a top 5 fantasy back strictly because of volume. So I invested heavily in both of those guys. They were like, third, fourth, fifth round picks. It wasn't like I was like jumping out them in the first round, but when those guys, they both got hurt. Walker had the calf injury. I think Chuba had a calf problem also, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And so when they were out, I mean, let's face it, like Chuba went out at the worst possible time because Rico Dowdle got to run against, Miami, and then some other horrendous defense.
25 yards against Miami, and they anointed him. They anointed him as the number 1 running back. There it was.
Yeah, and that crushed my soul there. And Kenneth Walker, because of his calf injury, and learning the new system and everything like that, Zach Charbonnet just got that leg up, and he got in with the coaching staff. And so they started just, utilizing Charbonnet, inside the red zone and near the goal line. And that sapped all the value out of Kenneth Walker. He just became a guy that you legitimately couldn't start him because you never knew what the touches were going to be like. So like that right there, those are my 2 biggest fantasy disappointments. And again, you can say Justin Jefferson because JJ McCarthy or whatever. And yes, that was disappointing, but like I was building my foundation on these running backs.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. I want to go back to to the Charbonnet Walker thing. I saw, and I'm in like 40 plus leagues this year, so I've witnessed a lot of draft boards, and without fail, Charbonnet was getting drafted ahead of Walker in a lot of drafts for a lot of the same things that you just discussed, and probably Charbonnet was the best handcuff you could ever find this year. So I get that, but Walker's now showing what he's all about, and I think that's a good thing. So speaking of the running backs, I felt like this was the year of the return of the anchor running back to your fantasy teams, whether it's Gibbs, Taylor, Bijan, CMC staying healthy, H.N. in Miami. You got a comment about that or thought about that?
I mean, it's 2 years in a row right now where we're actually seeing an increased usage of the running backs, and we are starting to see. I mean, the problem is that there are so few bell cows now, and that's definitely something that you have to take into consideration, especially if you're drafting in the early round. You want those guys because they're fantastic anchors. I think it was. I'm not sure by how much, but I think that this year there were the fewest pass attempts in the NFL in like 20 years. So if we are kind of seeing a little shift away from, the fast pace, the run and gun, the heavy passing schemes there, then you definitely have to pay attention to these running backs moving forward. So we've now seen them 2 years in a row where if you had those guys, I mean, the championships that I won are all on teams where I had Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Josh
those
Jacobs.
Are two of the players, and that's probably some of the biggest surprises was, and you're going to talk about that in a second. From my perspective, is CMC's health. To me, was the biggest surprise because he was going late first round, maybe early second, some drafts that I saw, and it was all predicated on his health. He stays healthy the entire year. You saw it; he became basically an RB1, RB2.
Yeah, which is fantastic, right? I mean, I wasn't drafting McCaffrey without anchoring him to another big running back, and I was just going to push the wide receivers down the way a little bit. And JT was he was just such a monster.
Man,
Jacobs was great. So I mean, you did have those abilities there, and it kept you protected in case McCaffrey got hurt, and that was huge. But that's actually not my biggest surprise.
What is?
Baby, how do we not love on Jacoby Brissett and Michael Wilson?
I knew you were going to say Michael Wilson. I knew that was coming.
Dude, those were my boys. I mean, the funny thing is, and this is always like one of the biggest misconceptions that new fantasy football players actually make. And you can kind of go back in time and find the different situations here. A team that's losing has to throw the football in order to play catch up. Running the football is the luxury of the winning team. And you got teams that they go out there and we look at it. San Francisco, Green Bay, the Colts. When they grab a lead, what do? They run the football constantly. And they try to just chew up the clock and walk out of there. So when you take a team like Arizona that's losing, Jacoby Brissett, I mean, that dude, he went like 6 or 7 straight games with at least 300 passing yards. And the amount of targets that were headed Michael Wilson's way because Marvin Harrison Jr. got hurt was spectacular. Like, that's what you want in fantasy. You want a wide receiver, quarterback combo that's just going to be chucking the ball all day long. You remember, what was it? Remember Blake Bortles and Allen Robinson for the Jaguars?
Great combo. That was the last we heard,
right?
Blake Bortles too.
You wouldn't be caught dead drafting Blake Bortles in any fantasy draft, but once he started connecting to Allen Robinson, garbage time counts.
It does.
And so for that,
I got to tell you a quick story. I don't mean to interrupt. It reminds me because I first met you at the FFPC several years ago, but I won the entire thing for the FFPC in 2008. You know who my quarterback was?
Who was it?
David Garrard.
Yeah.
And 2 of my wide receivers were rookies, Deshaun Jackson and Eddie Royal.
Oh, look at that.
Anyway, we digress, but I just wanted to share that with you. But Michael Wilson, in a lot of drafts, wasn't even drafted. He was either a waiver pickup or in best ball, I was picking him up in the 17th, 18th, 19th round of a best ball in one that didn't have kickers and defenses. So best ball slims that were out there that didn't have kickers and defenses. So, all right, I want to pivot to the last thing on the fantasy football season. I just mentioned it. Kickers. My goodness. If I could play Aubrey or Cam Little as a flex position, I would have. I mean, if you think about it, and I know everyone wants to know what is happening with these long field goals, and I think there's a good answer, and you probably know it, and that is the new K-ball rule that they have, which has really impacted the kicker's ability to add 6 to 10 yards. And for people who don't know, you probably know the K-ball rule.
No, I don't. Tell me.
Really? Okay. So the K-ball rule is it allows the kickers to season the football. They'll have 60 of them for the court. Every team is allocated 60 footballs per season. So they can take like a baseball and they can rough it up and it softens the football. And every kicker would tell you that it adds 6 to 10 yards. And they just changed that rule last year. So now you're seeing all of these, 50-yard field goals are like used to be kicking a 35-yard field goal. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I just thought that was a key moment in the fantasy world this year was the kickers. All right, let's pivot to the playoffs. And we're going to get to the Super Bowl, I promise. Speaking of surprises, any surprises team-wise this year with the playoffs? Good or bad?
No, I don't really, I kind of feel like, we had some really interesting matchups in the wild card round. And the two games that I thought could have gone either way were San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Jacksonville, Buffalo. Was I surprised that Denver beat Buffalo? Yeah, a little bit. But overall, not it wasn't huge. I was doing the FFPC playoff contest and I shot a video. I was like, you could legit fade Denver in your contest here because they're going to get one game. If they do get a second game, it's still not a high scoring offense. So what are we really, looking at here? So, I think that was a little bit on the surprising side. I'll tell you what actually was a very surprising thing. And it really sold me on the player. The Bears.
I knew you guys,
Caleb Williams, it's completely sold me on it. That is a guy, and you remember the movie of The Replacements and Gene Hackman saying to him, winners want the ball in the end. Caleb Williams wants the ball in his hands at the end. And while no, you don't want to have to rely on that, it's good to see that this kid is as cool under pressure as you could possibly get. And I think that that's a very important factor now that Ben Johnson is there and now that they're building something, having a guy like Caleb Wood, this could be a very, very dangerous quarterback moving forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a huge Bears fan. You can see the hat I'm wearing. And I've been a Bears fan my entire life. Grew up in Chicago, so I'm a Bears Cubs fan a little bit. And when they drafted him, I wasn't completely sold on Caleb Williams as the franchise quarterback. But the minute they hired Ben Johnson, I really felt like, okay, here's an opportunity for this guy to shine. And boy, did he ever. And I don't recall, and I'm not just because I'm touting the Bears here, but I don't recall a playoff. If you think about the wild card and then in the division rounds, exciting games. And two of those were the Bears comeback games. Yeah. The Packer game was crazy, not to mention the one against, some of the stuff that they did there. And that Rams game was incredible as well. I really thought Bears were going to win that game when that crazy touchdown pass to Cole Kmet. But, I think
that cost me money.
What's that?
That cost me money, Scott. I hated that moment there. I literally, when he just chucked it up there, I was like, oh, that's going out of bounds.
We thought so, too.
I'm great.
Yeah.
I'm fine. And then all of a sudden it landed in Cole Kmet's arms. I was like, no.
Yeah, and unfortunately they had a chance to win that game, but that didn't pan out well. Is this the beginning, Howard, in your opinion, of some of the young quarterbacks starting to shine? The Drake Mays, the Caleb's, the Bo Nix to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's a great quarterback group that's, just kind of up and coming. Like I said, I completely turned around and sold on Caleb Williams after watching him in the playoffs. Completely turned around. I will have plenty of shares of him next year.
Yeah.
I might be personally responsible for helping drive up his ADP to a point where Bears fans are going to get pissed off that you don't get to draft him anymore. Drake May and Bo Nix, I'd like to see Bo Nix run a little bit more. And I'm very curious, them parting ways with Joe Lombardi, whether or not you want to call Joe Lombardi the scapegoat for Sean Payton not kicking the field goal and taking the points. But if you're going to bring in an offensive coordinator now, you need somebody who's going to cater to Bo Nix's desire to run the football. Right, we saw Justin Herbert bring that aspect into his game also. So we see that with Drake May, we see it with Bo Nix, and I just think it just brings a whole different element. If Caleb Williams can trust himself to run with the football a little bit more, dude, that's going to be a mess for other teams.
He is a good runner.
Absolute mess.
He is a good runner, and he's fast.
He just doesn't trust himself yet.
Yeah. Speaking of the Denver game, I have to talk about it because I don't think, as much as I like to sit here and say that New England won that game, I think the weather won that game. And yeah, you can sit and talk about why didn't Peyton take those 3 points, which I thought was criminal given the fact that you got Jared Stidham as your quarterback, and you don't know when points are going to come. Take them now. But I think the weather. I've never seen a game where the weather changed so much, and they talked about it on TV. And it really, really impacted that game to the point where it really wasn't all that exciting for me. And I felt bad because I felt like the weather dominated that game.
Yeah, total dud in the second half. Total dud in the second half. I mean, you saw it with New England. They were like, yeah, we're pretty cool here. We'll go 3 and out and we'll send the ball back. And good luck, scoring on us here. And I think that's right. When Drake May threw that ball away, right, you were like, oh, man, like, that was just their whole plan the whole time was just to kill some more clock and do it that way and then just punt the football. You're right. It ruined that game. Yeah. It definitely ruined that game.
Yeah, and then the other part of that is if Bo Nix, big if Bo Nix was healthy, would he have run more than Stidham did? And the answer is probably absolutely would have. 100%. Could that have been the difference in the game? But, that's why they have these playoffs. Something's always different in playoffs. All right, so the two teams that are left, New England and Seattle, before we talk about the Super Bowl, and I know you know this fact very well, both teams started the season as 60-1 odds to win and make the Super Bowl. 60-1. In fact, I think the over-under on Seattle wins was around 8, if I recall. So you've got a great Super Bowl ahead of you, and you got two teams that I think are deserving, and it's going to be fun to watch, in my opinion. I think there's a couple themes that are buzzing around here, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. I think the theme around Darnold. I think he's silenced some of the critics. But if you take the last 2 games, they were spectacular. I think he won that game against. I think a team that the Rams is no slouch. Their defense is good, but he carved them up. And so the stat is that he's the first, and you think about the 2018 draft, you got Allen, Lamar, and Baker, 3 of those guys. None of those guys have won a Super Bowl. So Darnold, from a theme, could be the first quarterback from that 2018 draft class to win a Super Bowl. And by the way, he's got the best record in the last 2 years as a quarterback, 30-7. So that's one theme that I'd like to, if you have any comments on that.
Well, I thought we were friends, Scott. I thought you liked me. I thought you were like, this is going to be a friendly conversation about the Super Bowl and football. But now you've got to you got to reach into my chest. You got to grab my heart. You got to yank it out. You got to throw it on the ground, step on it a couple of times because here's the thing is that I'm sitting here watching the Patriots compete for another Super Bowl that quickly after that dynasty of having to live behind them in the standings the entire time. And who's standing in their way? Oh, a Jets quarterback that we should never have given up on from the beginning. So it's a very bittersweet Super Bowl for me. I'm definitely rooting for Sam Darnold to just kind of keep it together, right? I think that this is It's such a great matchup for him. Going up against the Patriots, because I think there are a lot of narratives involved, right? Because I'm seeing ghosts came against the Patriots, and so this is total retribution. This is a great moment for him, and I think that what he's put together with Jackson Smith and the Jigba has just been absolutely spectacular this year. You think about it, JSN had almost 3 times as many receiving yards than Cooper Kupp, who was the next highest receiving yards on that team. So he did it. They're throwing it to JSN. Everybody knows it's going to JSN, and yet you can't stop it.
Again, I'm going to digress here for a second. I did not collectively do well in fantasy this year, and one had to do with JSN, because I faded JSN in a lot of drafts because the narrative was Darnold's there. JSN is the only receiver that they really have, and that team is probably going to be a 7 or 8 win, team. So I faded JSN, killed me, absolutely. And he was going, as you know, You could get him early 3rd round in a lot of drafts. JSN was sitting on a lot of teams who won championships, I guarantee you.
Oh, it was crazy. I had him, so I put together a cheat sheet, a draft day cheat sheet as part of the draft guide. And I say to people, listen, there are guys that I'll tell you to take ahead of their ADP just simply because I believe in the player and the situation. I had JSN tagged as a late 2nd round pick. And most people just left him to the 3rd round. My producer at SiriusXM, Josh Wagner, got to shout out to him because he did a draft with a bunch of his buddies, and he was not of his right mind during the draft, and he followed the cheat sheet, and he picked towards the end of that 1st round, and he went Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, JSN as his first 3 picks, and just destroyed the rest of the league.
Well, and I think, not to digress on fantasy season, but there's a similar narrative to Puka around, was Stafford even going to play this year because of his back? How's that impact Puka? And so he was going down to the end of the 1st round in a lot of drafts. Think about this draft coming up in 2026. Puka and JSN are probably going to be 2 of the top 4 players picked 1st round, and maybe number 1 in some. You never know. Obviously, a couple of the themes that kind of caught my attention. Vrabel first to coach and play for the same team to win a Super Bowl. I'm sure that's going to be talked about ad nauseum. The revenge game in 2015, that's going to be talked about ad nauseum. But here's one that I think, and I'd love to get your take on this. These are 2 very good defensive teams. Do we see, for the first time in 10 years, Von Miller was the last one to do it, a defensive player win the MVP for Super
Bowl? Ooh. I don't think so. I mean, unless you're looking at, like, let's say a defensive back has a pick 6, a crucial pick 6 or something like that. If a linebacker comes in and strip sack fumble, bring it back for a touchdown. The thing that, when you look at these 2 defenses, they're so solidly built that there's nobody there who really, if you're looking at New England, is it Robert Spillane? Is it, Christian Gonzalez? Is it going to be Christian Barmore? Like, who's the standout guy that, you could come from there? When you look at Seattle, it's like, I don't want to brutalize a lot of the names there. So, but like Reek Woolen, I just don't.
Well, you had to bring that one up, didn't you?
Oh, dude, I hate that dude so much.
That was not. Anyway, go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt.
No. I mean, listen, we could just sit here and shoot it on him. I was actually, I'll tell you what, in all honesty, I was rooting for the Rams after that touchdown pass to Nakua after Reek Woolen with the penalty for trash talking. So, but I think when we look at this game here, because these defenses are so strong, I think that the MVP is going. It's got to end up being a quarterback.
It always does. It always does, and it's rare that you see a defensive player. But I just keep thinking, that some of the key matchups in this game is going to be Seattle's defense versus May and that very suspect O-line. I mean, you're talking about a left tackle's a rookie. Will Campbell's a good guy, but that Seattle defense, their front seven is as good as anybody. And then you've got the other defensive guy that you already talked about, Christian Gonzalez. Does he have a game and shut down JSN? And does he have a pick six?
I mean, he could. He could definitely have a pick six. I mean, Darnold unfortunately killed my bet in the last game because I bet that he was going to throw an interception. He did not. But, I think, the moment's going to be so big for these guys that there are going to be jitters. There are going to be nerves there. I think they'll settle down. As much as I like Christian Gonzalez, I mean, maybe he shadows JSN, but they're going to need to bring help on there. They're going to have to either bracket him, pull a safety down or something like that. I think that's going to be a tall order because I just think JSN is just so good on getting position, on the coverage and everything like that. I think he's one of the best route runners, if not the best route runner in the NFL.
So if you watch him, you watch the tape of that guy, and if you look at past Ohio State receivers, they all had that same discipline. But he is certainly the elite of the elite in my mind.
For sure.
For sure. Any keys in your mind in this game? I think I've heard you talk about the Seattle running game versus the Pats defense. I think that's another factor here in this game.
I think that's definitely going to be a factor in this game. I think, I do think that the advantage kind of tilts over to Seattle on that front. I think that it's going to be very difficult for Ramondre Stevenson and Trevion Henderson to get going against the Seattle defense. The key matchup for me is going to be, does Seattle put a spy on Drake May? Because if you can contain Drake May and take the running game aspect out of it, because that's how it was so easy for them. I mean, Ramondre wasn't running that well against Denver. He was running okay, but it was the threat of Drake May running the football also that helped open up some of the running lanes. So I think Seattle definitely needs to, whether it's keeping a spy on Drake May or something like that, I think the advantage kind of tilts over to them for that aspect, as opposed to, Sam Darnold just kind of, winging it around every once in a while, or just kind of dumping the ball off to Kenneth Walker. That's something that's part of the game that Drake May doesn't do as much as I thought I would see him do in this, realm, this run of defenses that he's faced, right? And I thought we would see a couple more, design screens and some dump offs to help neutralize the pass rush. If they're not going to do that, I know Seattle will, and that could be the difference maker.
I'd be shocked if Seattle doesn't put some sort of shadow on May. I mean, it's the whole Josh Allen effect. I mean, he's as good as Josh Allen with the ball in his hands when he wants to. He's got that speed. He's got that size. But because I like Ramondre, but I don't think he's a game breaker against that defense. I don't think he's going anywhere. And I don't think Vrabel really trusts a rookie in the Super Bowl. He didn't certainly trust him in the division in the AFC Championship game. He would get 2 carries, and Henderson's a great looking back. So anyway, one thing I always like about Super Bowls is, and this gets talked about as well, is there an X factor here? I know we've talked about players here and there, but is there an X factor? When I think of X factor, the first guy that comes to mind is a long time ago, a guy by the name of Timmy Smith, running back for the Redskins in 1988, who ran for 200 and some odd yards. No one expected it. He was the one, even though Doug Williams won the MVP, quarterback, easily could have gone to Timmy Smith. Is there an X factor that you see here that could produce something similar to that type of impact?
On the ground, no,
or in the air. It could be either way.
I love Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
I really do. And, and he's got that element where he can run one back on special teams, and that would be great. But, I mean, we saw it just this past game against the Rams, just real early on, hit him downfield, I mean, if you're going to have Christian Gonzalez, who's going to be paying so much attention to JSN, you're going to see a lot of one-on-one situations for Rashid Shaheed. I think that's kind of be the X factor, maybe not just limited to just him. I feel like AJ Barner, the tight end, could also be a factor here. New England was very bad against the tight end in coverage. If you look at like DVOA statistics and things, like how much, fantasy points per game that they gave up to the position, New England wasn't very good against covering the tight end. That if they bracket JSN and they are successful at doing it, that means that Shaheed's in one-on-one situations, and you could see AJ Barner in the middle of the field in a number of spots there. I know everybody wants to say Cooper Kupp, but Shaheed, I love that kid's game.
Yeah, I think there's a potential MVP if he runs one back, catches one for a touchdown. There's all kinds of possibilities. So along that lines, and I know we're about to run out of time here shortly, but any prop bets currently, and I know they're going to change a lot over the next several days to a week, any prop bets that stand out right now that says, oh, I kind of like that?
Ooh, I'll be honest with you. I have not jumped neck deep into these prop bets yet. I have not. I will definitely be looking at Shaheed's yardage total. I'll be looking at his receiving yards total. One of the one of the bets that I made, and keep an eye on this one. I'll tell you what. Look for Rashid Shaheed's rushing yards prop. Yeah. Like, see where it opened, because last week it opened at 0.5. And I was like, I'm in on that. That dude had he was given at least one carry in 7 out of his last 10 games. And in 6 of those 7 games, he had more than 2 yards. So see where they, how they opened up with Shaheed with his rushing yards, because they love doing the jet sweeps and the end arounds and the fun little gimmicky stuff with him there. I would look at Shaheed with rushing yards. I'm definitely going to sneak a peek on AJ Barner and his receiving yards, maybe just his receptions if they put it low, because he hasn't been all that active in the last 2 games. So if they keep it low at like a 2.5, I think that's probably something I definitely want to look at for sure.
I saw one bet that again, the early on props is, and we talked about Drake May and his rushing ability. I still think Seattle's going to contain him, but I think the first one was 33 yards. I kind of like the under. I think Seattle can hold him under 33 yards of rushing. That's one that I like.
Really?
I don't know where it is today.
I don't know where it is today either. Should I look around for it? Should I throw a little gander? I'll tell you, man. Yeah, what I'll do is, for when this publishes for everybody else out there, I always post, if you follow me on social media, at RotoBuzzGuy, all over the place, at The Real RotoBuzzGuy, if you like to scroll through TikTok, because I constantly throw out prop bets over there, whether or not you're betting them with a regular sports book or you're doing it on something like Underdog or rtsports.com, whatever it might be. I always throw out a bunch of stuff. At fantasyalarm.com, we've got the sports betting tracker. So if you just go to our NFL page, you'll see like expert picks in our menu, and that'll list every single pick that I'm making for this Super Bowl. And that's going to include all those goofy, dumbass novelty props. I know you look to me like a guy who likes to bet on the length of the national anthem.
No way. I'm not touching those things. We'll not touch that. Hey, I already know the answer to this question, and then we'll say our goodbyes. But based on what I've heard you talk about in the last 2 nights, what I've heard you here talk about, I know where you're leaning. But right now, and by the way, this where people will see this podcast a week from now, so 3 or 4 days before the Super Bowl, a lot can change between now and then. But I think I know where you're leaning. You want to tell the audience where you're leaning?
Oh, I'm rooting for Seattle all the way. I think it's still 4.5 points. Yeah. I would probably lay the points for 4.5. If it starts to creep up at all, if it goes up to like 5.5, I probably would turn around and look at New England, right? Because I think that this could be like a 27-21 type game, maybe, is kind of where the vibes are that I'm getting from it right now. But yeah, I mean, listen, I they would pull my Jets card if I ended up saying I'm going to root for, because secretly I loaded up on Drake May in fantasy this year because I really loved his game.
I like him as well. I think he's up and coming. He'll be a top 4 quarterback next year in the drafts. I think certainly top 5, certainly top 5. And before we again, you just reminded me, since you're such a great Jets fan and your hatred for New England, got a comment on Belichick?
You know what? In all honesty, I think it's garbage that he didn't get in as a first ballot Hall of Famer, because and you know, if you were listening to the Fantasy Alarm show, you know my rationale for that also. I mean, listen, Spygate, Deflategate, yeah, definitely huge issues there. But if you're going to penalize Belichick for Spygate or Deflategate, you have to do the same thing for Tom Brady.
Absolutely.
And there's no way in this world that the NFL is not going to vote in Tom Brady as a first ballot Hall of Famer. So why are we doing this to Belichick? The politics behind the scenes are horrendous.
You know,
they're horrendous.
Regardless of what you think about New England, not you personally, but in general, I think they're, you know, no one likes to see New England again in a Super Bowl. I get all that. But the guy's got 8 rings. 8. Count them, 8. And how he doesn't make first ballot Hall of Fame is beyond me, but that's a story for another day. Howard, I want to thank you personally. I've known you for several years, and I view you as one of the great guys in our industry, one of the most analytical, spot-on fantasy and betting guys that I know. Promote Fantasy Alarm, because I tell everybody, I use you guys religiously. Promote Fantasy Alarm, what you're doing in baseball and football. Please.
All right. Well, yeah, definitely. You know, once the Super Bowl ends, my brain immediately shifts all the way over to baseball. If you're a fantasy baseball player, you know, our draft guide just came out. Our Fantasy Alarm, we do an all sports package because football is 365, right? I mean, it's a year round thing, whether it's the draft or the coaching movement or anything like that, dynasty, best ball, everything. So we run football 365 days a year. We cover every other sport in season-long DFS and betting. So if you want to head over to Fantasy Alarm and get all of our content, all of our videos, all of our betting picks, everything like that, our NFL team was up about 100 units by the end of the conference championship. So we had a great season over there. We're going to keep running that one back. You can go to fantasyalarm.com/ what do you want to do? Yeah, I think it's fantasyalarm.com. You can just go to fantasyalarm.com/win.
Navigate, yeah.
And if you use the promo code BENDER, then it'll take 25% off. Like, we run deals and stuff like that sporadically, but this one here runs year round. It just knocks 25% off. And it's all a season long, the DFS, the betting, it's draft guides, it's cheat sheets, it's everything. It's access into our premium Discord, which means that you can hit me up at 2:00 in the morning and I'll probably answer you because I'm 4 hours behind the East Coast right now.
I know, I'm sending emails in early my time and thinking, he's not going to read this for at least 5 or 6 hours. But you know, the other thing too, that people, I think you also have a podcast. You have Front Office Insights you do with Jim Bowden. You want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, that's part of our draft guide, actually. The GM, Jim Bowden, who was a GM for 16 years between the Cincinnati Reds and the Washington Nationals, brought them a championship, both those teams into a championship. So he and I, we sit there. It's called Front Office Insights, and it's 6 different podcast episodes. And in each episode, we break down every single team from the top of the front office and to what their tendencies are, to how they're going to handle the team all year, to the prospects that could come up for fantasy baseball. It's legit. It's insight that you don't get anywhere else because Jim is so dialed in with all the GMs and all the managers and all the players of MLB that the edge that he gives you, especially for a fantasy aspect, is just absolutely huge. So that's all part of our draft guide there. I do the show on SiriusXM, the Fantasy Alarm Show. That's Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SiriusXM's Fantasy Sports Radio is channel 87.
Know it well. You and Jim make a great dynamic duo in your cast and crew. I listen to your show as often as I possibly can, and I'm a huge fan of both you guys, and you guys do a great job. And so, Howard, thank you so much. I would love to. We are going to do these podcasts when the football season starts back up every week. We're going to do it on Tuesday, and we're going to go and look at each game. I would love to one week try to commandeer you be a guest again. I'd love to have you whenever you want to, but I'll send you. I'm sure I'll send you multiple invites at some point down the road. But I truly, truly thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Scott. Definitely a pleasure, man. I always love getting a chance to chop it up with you, whether we're doing it at FSGA, whether we're doing it here on a podcast. And I will definitely take you up on any offer that you have for me to join you here again.
That'd be great. Doubt. Maybe I'll see you at the FFPC this year, maybe, potentially.
Ooh. We got to talk to Eric Balkman about that if they want to bring me along.
And if you have 2 minutes or 1 minute, I want to tell everybody this story, how I first met Howard. And it's a great story. And I know you're not going to remember this, but it's a funny story. I came out of the FFPC draft, and you guys were doing interviews as people were coming out of the drafts. And Balky flagged me down and said, would you do it? And I said, sure. And you guys looked at my draft. But the one thing that you said, and it was, and I'll never forget this, is I'm in Bears gear everywhere. And I did not draft a single Bear on my draft, but I drafted a bunch of Lions and Vikings and Packers. And you laughed at me, and I think something to the effect that, well, I'm a Jets fan, I can relate.
Right? It's the anti-move, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to take my own guys and run the risk of a losing fantasy season and a losing real life season. That's what I did with Drake May. I won't draft any Jets, but hell, give me as many Patriots and Buffalo Bills as I can
Jordan
possibly
Love on
get.
Several of my teams this year, and my family disowned me. So you always draft with your head, not with your heart. So it's all good. Howard, thank you very much. Enjoy Juneau. I love that part of the country, and so have a lot of fun.
Thank you so much again, Scott. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Howard. Have a good evening, too.